Consequently, he would attain only the level of Padisambhadinusana, meaning that he had sufficient wisdom and expository skills to elucidate to others the basic path of Buddhist practice, but not its entire breadth and depth. Although he humbly stated that his teaching was merely sufficient to show the way, those who witnessed his practice and heard the profound Dhamma that he taught throughout his life were so deeply impressed that no words can describe it. It would certainly be difficult to witness or hear anything comparable in this day and age much in need of such a noble person. The sign, at one point during his meditation training at Wat Liap, Achariya Mun Bhuridatta, converged into a state of calm and a vision arose spontaneously. The mental image was of a dead body laid out before him, bloated, oozing pus, and seeping with bodily fluids. Vultures and dogs were fighting over the corpse, tearing into the rotting flesh and flinging it around, until what remained was all scattered about. The whole scene was unimaginably disgusting, and he was appalled. From then on, Achariya Mun constantly used this image as a mental object to contemplate at all times, whether sitting in samadhi, walking in meditation, or engaging in other daily activities. He continued in this manner until, one day, the image of the corpse changed into a translucent disk that appeared suspended before him. The more he focused intensely on the disk, the more it changed its appearance without pause. The more he tried to follow, the more it altered its form so that he found it impossible to tell where the series of images would end. The more he investigated the visions, the more they continued to change in character, ad infinitum. For example, the disk became a tall mountain range where Achariya Mun found himself walking, brandishing a sharp sword and wearing shoes. Then, a massive wall with a gate appeared. He opened the gate to look inside and saw a monastery where several monks were sitting in meditation. Near the wall he saw a steep cliff with a cave where a hermit was living. He noticed a conveyance, shaped like a cradle and hanging down the face of the cliff by a rope. Climbing into the cradle-like conveyance, he was drawn up to the mountain peak. At the summit, he found a large Chinese junk with a square table inside, and a hanging lantern that cast a luminescent glow upon the whole mountain terrain. He found himself eating a meal on the mountain peak and so on, and so forth, until it was impossible to see an end to it all. Achariya Mun said that all the images he experienced in this manner were far too numerous to recall. For a full 3 months, Achariya Mun continued to meditate in this way. Each time when he dropped into samadhi, he withdrew from it to continue his investigation of the translucent disk, which just kept giving him a seemingly endless series of images. However, he did not receive enough beneficial results from this to be convinced that this was the correct method. For after practicing in this manner, he was oversensitive to the common sights and sounds around him. Pleased by this and disappointed by that, he liked some things and hated others. It seemed that he could never find a stable sense of balance. Because of this sensitivity, he came to believe that the samadhi which he practiced was definitely the wrong path to follow. If it were really correct, why did he fail to experience peace and calm consistently in his practice? On the contrary, his mind felt distracted and unsettled, influenced by many sense objects that it encountered, much like a person who had never undergone any meditation training at all. Perhaps the practice of directing his attention outwards towards external phenomena violated the fundamental principles of meditation. Maybe this was the reason he failed to gain the promised benefits of inner peace and happiness. Thus, Achariya Mun came to a new understanding about himself. Instead of focusing his mind on external matters, he brought his citta back inside, within the confines of his own physical body. From then his investigations were centered only on his own body. Keeping a sharp mindfulness, he examined the body from top to bottom, side to side, inside out and throughout, every body part and every aspect. In the beginning, he preferred to conduct his examinations while walking in meditation, pacing back and forth in deep thought. Sometimes he needed to rest his body from these exertions. So, he sat in samadhi for a while, though he absolutely refused to let his citta converge into its habitual state of calm. Rather, he forced it to stay put within the body's domain. The citta had no other choice but to travel around the many parts of the body and probe into them. When it was time for him to lie down, the investigation continued inside his mind until he fell asleep. He meditated like this for several days until he felt ready to sit in samadhi and try to attain a state of calm with his newly discovered method. He challenged himself to find out what state of calm the citta could attain. Deprived of peace for many days now, and having begun the intense training associated with body contemplation, his citta converged rapidly into a calm state with unprecedented ease. He knew with certainty that he had the correct method, for, when his citta converged this time, his body appeared to be separated from himself. It seemed to split into two at that moment. Mindfulness was in force during the entire time, right to the moment that the citta dropped into samadhi. It didn't wander and waver about as it had previously. Thus, Achariya Mun was convinced that his newfound method was the right one for the preliminary work of meditation practice. From then on, he continued to religiously practice body contemplation until he could attain a state of calm whenever he wanted. With persistence, he gradually became more and more skilled in this method, until the citta was firmly anchored in samadhi. He had wasted 3 whole months chasing the disk and its illusions. But now, his mindfulness no longer abandoned him, and therefore, he was no longer adversely affected by the influences around him. This whole episode clearly shows the disadvantages of not having a wise teacher to guide one. Misjudgments occur without timely advice and direction in meditation. Achariya Mun was a perfect example of this. Having no teacher can lead to costly mistakes that can easily harm the meditator, or, at the very least, delay his progress. During Achariya Mun's early years as a wandering monk, people showed little interest in the practice of Kamana meditation. Many regarded it as something strange, even alien to Buddhism, having no legitimate place in the life of a monk. Back then, a Dhutanga monk, walking in the distance on the far side of a field, was enough to send country folk into a panic. Being fearful, those still close to the village quickly ran home. Those walking near the forest ran into the thick foliage to hide, being too scared to stand their ground or greet the monks. Thus, Dhutanga monks, wandering in unfamiliar regions during their travels, seldom had a chance to ask the locals for much-needed directions. Women from the countryside often took their small children on excursions into the surrounding hills to pick wild herbs and edible plants, or to fish in outlying ponds. Suddenly spotting a party of Dhutanga monks walking toward them, they would yell to each other in alarm, "Dhamma monks! Dhamma monks are coming!" With that they threw their baskets and other gear to the ground with a thud, and frantically rushed to find a safe hiding place. Their discarded belongings could have been damaged or broken when flung to the ground, but they took no notice. Everyone simply fled into the nearby forest, or if close by, to their village homes. Meanwhile the children, who had no idea what was happening, started crying and pleading for help when they saw their mother scream and run away. Too slow to keep pace with the adults, the little ones